I think especially as a male leader, as a father, right, as someone in a spiritual community that has power, people are always looking to the men, whether they want to or not. I think it's something very biological where they're gauging for safety ultimately, right? Is this a safe man? Is this a trustworthy man? Is this a protector or a predator, right? It's kind of the thing that is going through people's head when they look at men in power, especially men as we age, right? As we get older, we tend to take on that projection.
Welcome to Be Bold Branding, where we discuss the power of differentiating yourself through your own unique story and standout personal brand.
Here we go. All right. Today's show is for all the men out there and the people who love them. Men, are you puzzled by conflicting advice that says masculinity is toxic and you need to embrace your feminine side, while at the same time you're being instructed to be strong, take charge, and suppress your emotions? Well, that advice simply results in anxiety and uncertainty. Today's guest is Marc Azoulay, the founder of Men's Therapy Online, a community and healing hub for men who want to get back on their feet or take their lives to the next level. With a background in psychoanalysis, neuroscience, and Buddhism, Marc is able to help men uncover and destroy the unconscious barriers that hold them back. His mission is to help men become the best version of themselves and truly show up for their lives, relationships, and community.
Marc, welcome to Be Bold Branding.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy to be on the show.
Well, we're happy to have you on here because I think this is such a prevalent conversation to have. But before we get into it, like some of the nuts and bolts of it, we always like to ask our guests, give us a little bit of background. Like, how did you end up in this space? Like, what led you to this point in your life? Give us just a little bit of color.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole story there. So I'll give you kind of the highlights. You can dig in if there's anything that's of interest to you, the listeners. So it all began when I was a kid, right? Just like everybody else. A lot of therapists, right? We come from trauma. And my parents, to kind of give it high level, were great. I think they actually gave a lot of love and they gave a lot of security and safety, but they did not give a lot of emotional attunement. They were both immigrants trying to make their way in America, and they succeeded in that. And I will always be grateful for that. But I didn't have a lot of emotional connection. So I kind of was a very shy kid, really nerdy kid, really shut down in a lot of ways, and had a lot of depression, shame, things like that. Didn't like myself ultimately, right? So I went to college and I did what a lot of young men do, is I recreated myself. But I recreated myself to what, an 18-year-old boy thinks is cool, right? So what is that? Like drugs, right? Women and punk rock. So that's what I did. I actually lied, honestly. Like I created a whole persona of a guy that wasn't me, that wasn't this like nerdy Jewish kid from Maryland, right? But that was this like hardcore, badass, like rebel without a cause, bad boy, right? Which I'm not, I'm not that guy. And what I did, which again, a lot of young boys do, is I never said no. So when everything was put in front of me around different drug use or sexual encounters or anything, I could not say no. I could not show weakness. I could not back down in any way. I was like, oh yeah, cocaine, done that 1,000 times, rack it up, right? Like, oh yeah, you want to drive drunk? No problem. Like I'm an expert at that, right? Like just kind of fake confidence, fake arrogance, which ultimately resulted in my life burning down in flames, right? Resulted in drug addiction, resulted in kind of a lot of things collapsing, a lot of relationships falling apart. And that's what got me into therapy, was as a client first. So, I started being a client in therapy in college. I went to the, stuff at my university and then kind of expanded out from there. So kind of, I'll do a quick fast forward, which essentially is, I worked in addictions for a while. And then what I found is a lot of men struggle with not just an addiction like me, but struggle with some deeper questions of what does it mean to be an adult? What does it truly mean to be a man versus this kind of like fake thing that a lot of us put on? What does a truly meaningful life look like? And how can we create a life that is actually like fulfilling, right? Versus always chasing that next high or that next kind of zap of fun or of dopamine.
Well, I definitely can relate in so many ways. And I think most men can. So first off, thank you for championing that, which is definitely why we wanted to have you on the show so we could talk about this thing, because I think that male leadership when done correctly is very powerful for the community, definitely inside their families. at their future, the happiness that we all deserve, and can find if we have truth in our life. So thank you for doing that. You know,
I especially think it's hard for men to balance the I can be sensitive side versus I have to be the tough one side, because historically, going back to the 1950s, the men were the breadwinners, the women stayed at home, and of course a lot has changed since then, but it also changed men's views of themselves, I think. And I think we'd probably be honest with ourselves and say it probably started around that time frame, that the views started to change when women started to work outside the home even more, right? And I may not be making a lot of friends here, women today, but that's okay. This is not about us. This is about men today. But actually, I say that tongue in cheek, but it is about all of us, actually, because the healthier we are as individuals, whether we're a man or a woman, it depends upon the health of our families, of our relationships, of the workplace, etc. Why do you think, other than that, obviously, I think that it started back then, but why do you think today there's such conflicting advice still so many years later?
God, there's so much stuff there. I do want to make, I think, prompting a couple disclosures that I do on a lot of shows, because it is taboo to talk about men now. And I think that's tapping into exactly what you're talking about, right? That there's a fear of like getting canceled or being like a Proud Boys or being like a Trump supporter or like something, right? This like idea of like being this like ignorant person, which is not the case, right? So I want to make a couple of disclosures really quick, right? One is exactly what we're talking about. I think women have done a phenomenal job with the feminist movement of expanding their role, right? Getting jobs, awesome. Right? Like being able to advocate for themselves. Awesome. The Me Too movement was needed and necessary to get power back in the workplace, right? And to get power back and believe women victims. And I think men need to catch up. We haven't had our version of that. I think in the 60s, we did the kind of like get to do their feminine side, be a little more hippie, but that doesn't work for a lot of men, especially masculine presenting men. So I just want to really commend the work that women as a whole have done. And I think it's created both the space for men to step up more and the pressure, because I think like the modern woman wants a lot more from her man. They want that emotionality. They want that consistency. They want that intimacy in a way that, in the 50s or before wasn't really on the table,
That's true. I think arguably
Great
too, because I stress the word arguably, because there will be many arguments with what I'm about to say. But women, it's much easier for us, in my opinion, it's much easier for us to have the soft feminine side and still have some authority in our own life, because we don't really have to walk that line between I have to be the masculine force or masculine, I guess it would say just force. I don't have to be the masculine force in the home. I don't have to be, I can show some authority in the workplace, because that's what women need to do sometimes to climb the ladder, right? But in the home, I don't have to show that. And I think that men having to show that side of things can betray them sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of men can get stuck in that. It's called the man box. You can Google that. There's been actually a ton of research done about how both men describe themselves and how women describe men, and kind of the roles that were put up. So you can Google man box. You can throw it in the show notes or something. But essentially, a lot of men are trapped by that. And there's a lot of pressure that men have to live under, right? That again, in this modern world of social justice and privilege often gets minimized, right? But I think being a breadwinner is really hard. Feeling like we are solely financially responsible for a family is really difficult. Men are often the initiators. We're often, looked at to make the first move, whether that be, in business or in their family or sexually, or opening up a hard conversation or confronting somebody about something, right? I think things that men think are natural, right? It's like, oh yeah, he always does that. It's not natural. It takes time. It takes courage. It takes effort to learn how to be that initiator in life, right? I think men are often also supposed to be protectors, right? We're supposed to jump in the line of fire. We're supposed to lift the heavy thing. We're supposed to defend the people that we love. And I think for a lot of men, that is very rewarding and also really scary, it can be intimidating to like be the one that jumps in front of the bullet. So the idea, at least the way that I look at masculine, there's a lot of different stuff out there, is I think those roles have a lot of value and have a lot of meaning for men. And it's worth acknowledging that one, men aren't naturally gifted. It's okay if you don't know how to do this. There's ways to learn. And two, just widening the lens a little bit of knowing that, like, yes, it is difficult and it is challenging, and we can get some kudos for those things too, not to be taken for granted. Because I think a lot of men feel taken for granted and feel very lonely often.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. Especially being somebody from a personal experience that has, lived a couple of lives, if you will. I have been married before, and that didn't work out very well because I didn't feel the role or space very good. I wasn't really good at what I was supposed to be doing. I thought I was good at what I was doing. I wasn't good at what I was doing, and then being a father and making those mistakes through the years or whatnot. And then I'm fortunate enough to meet Tanya, later on in life, when a lot of mistakes I had learned from. And so we didn't have to relearn those mistakes. And I think that I practiced, and then I could do a little bit better. But I can tell you, and it'd be interesting what you think about this, Mark, the best manly advice I probably ever got was from a protege at work. Okay. My right hand, effectively. She came to me as a high school intern in my real estate office, and now she's my COO. I mean, runs the company, and in my absence, she's the best answer. 7 years I've been working with her together, and we kept having these problems in the office, never between her and I, but with other people. And and the way I would handle this or handle that, and I was super easy and super easy, just go along, come along, everything's fine, and then this big blow up, everybody crying in the office, Mike's a terrible person. And she came to me, she goes, we were going to hire this new person. And so I said, well, look, what can I do different? I got to do something different. Like, I'm not doing this right. She goes, listen, you're usually like a 1 on the being an ass scale. And then you go to 10. She said, I'm going to need you to be a consistent 3 or 4.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, I don't even know what that looks like. Like, I don't even know what a 3 or 4 looks like. So now, every now and then something to come up and she'll be like,
I saw, Mark, I saw your face. I saw that smile and that nod of approval. Tell me what you were thinking when he said that.
I'm being very vulnerable here, guys.
No, I love that you're sharing that. It's such a common thing, right? It's such a common thing. There's a great book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, for our listeners to check out, that's about this. But a lot of men have this pattern where we are afraid of our power. It's kind of a way that I look at it, right? Because our power historically can really hurt. I don't want to minimize that.
Agreed.
People caused wars, hurt women. Like, male power is really, really powerful. But it's about wielding it, right? Wielding it, like I said, at that 3 or 4 level, because a lot of guys suppress. They're at 1, and then there's a big blow up at 10, right? And it can come across either hot or cold, right? The hot is like the big blow up. The cold is like cutting people off, avoiding, shunning, that type of thing. And that people are really aware of that. I think especially as a male leader, as a father, right, as someone in a spiritual community that has power, people are always looking to the men, whether they want to or not. I think it's something very biological, where they're gauging for safety ultimately, right? Is this a safe man? Is this a trustworthy man? Is this a protector or a predator, right? It's kind of the thing that is going through people's head when they look at men in power, especially men as we age, right? As we get older, we tend to take on that projection. So all that to say, 100%, I mean, I've gone through a version of that. And what I help my guys with that have, they come for anger management, right? Because they have these blow-ups and they hate the blow-up. But the anger management is just what your protege told you, is like, be less angry more often. Right? Being like really angry rarely, be like a little angry all the time. And that means having those hard conversations, especially as a business owner, having those conversations where you're calling somebody out, or you're pointing out an unhealthy dynamic, or you're, writing somebody up, having those more frequently so that they're not fully charged, because then you can actually work on the problem instead of it getting to a point where a lot of guys get to, where they just like blow up and fire their employee, right? Or they blow up and say something stupid. And, that problem employee might leave, but every other person in the workplace saw what happened.
Yes.
And that's the long-term damage, right? That's actually the problem. Is that they lose trust and they lose faith and they lose respect. And that over time can bury a business. So all to say is I'm happy that you're doing that work, because it is really critical to being a good man and a great leader.
Like what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and learn how you can change how you're seen and charge what you're worth.
Well, they that remains to be seen, but there's always the potential, and
He's doing great.
where
Don't let him
there's a
fool you.
desire, right? But I don't mind being on the hot point for a minute, and especially if it speaks to a listener out there or whatnot. I was raised with mostly by a single mother from the time I was 11 on. Now I had an idyllic childhood before then. We were well off. My dad owned his own business. We had cars, pools, houses, planes, boats. Like, we had a lot of nice stuff. But then it all sort of just fell apart. And, and then I was raised in between two sisters. And then later on had a stepsister. And then later on had two daughters of my own. And then later on have a son and a daughter. So I have, I can't throw a football, but I can braid hair, including French braid. I know how to pick up that last lock in my pinky. But the thing about it is fear of confrontation. I don't like confrontation. I don't like it. I want to be the authority figure because I know the answer, and in my space I do. But I don't want to be the guy that calls them to the carpet. But I'm learning how the key to that, you tell me if I'm wrong, is the empathy that I'm able to feel towards that person. And, because I realized that the true problem with me was I need to love people more. And now I approach it in a way that I'm like, okay, what is best for them? How can I do best for them? And I think the conversations have gotten softer. What's your thoughts on these?
I agree. There's tons of great metaphors. One that is coming to mind right now, to bring women back in the conversation as well, is that, the role of the man is to protect the castle, right? To build the gate, to be the guard, to deal with the perimeter, establish the perimeter, right? And the role of the woman is to make the castle somewhere that's worth living. Right? Like, it's not valuable to have a fence if what's inside is just like a desert, right? Like, women are really great at like beauty and community and connection and life, right? They bring so much life to a situation. But as men, we have to really mind that fence, right? And that means really being selective who comes into our fence and who doesn't come into our fence, right? Being that gatekeeper. And that can be a problematic person, that can be bringing in conflict, that can be bringing in danger, right? Like, and when we talk about empathy, that's the big part, right? I think the evolved man, if you want to call it that, is very community focused, and it isn't just thinking about what they want to do. It's thinking about what is behind that fence. What are they protecting? What is best for their community, for their family, for their business, whatever it is. And it does take a level of empathy and selflessness, in order to see the bigger picture. And trust, right? And then trust that once someone is in, they then get the agency to, build their hut and, make the castle their own in some way, right? So not being controlling of that. But I think protecting the perimeter is a lot of what I hear when you're talking. Often does mean calling people out and closing the door on some people, right? Or saying like, hey, if you want to come here, you have to do X, Y, and Z, right? Having some standards for the people that we let into our lives and into our companies.
Yeah, that's good. Standards are good. Boundaries, that sort of thing.
So as we segue into Marc Men's Therapy Online, which is what you founded, I want to ask this question: how did you break out of your own box?
Yeah, a couple really powerful ways. I would say the first one was actually psychedelic use, which I know can be a little bit taboo now, but the idea of using mushrooms or LSD when I was younger and being like, oh my God, one, there's so much more to me than I thought. Some of these things that I questioned, my first experiences where they broke me down, right? I was having memories that I thought I had pushed away. I was having physical sensations that I thought were not there. I was feeling things. I was coming alive. That's not the answer, but it was something that, kind of opened my eye to like, whoa, there is a lot more to life right now than just kind of the tight wound, having the stick all the way up my ass, basically all the time, right? There's like more there. So that was like a good flash. The second thing was founding my own business. I think in the modern world, that is the coming of age ritual for all people, men and women, right? We don't often go out into the jungle with a stick, and have to like survive. But being a business owner is basically the closest equivalent we have of that, is really like getting out there, having opinions, having a voice, taking a big risk. I learned a lot, and I saw a lot of bad habits that I had, right? A lot of laziness, a lot of fear, a lot of cowardice, a lot of conflict avoidance. And I had to work on those for years, using the business kind of as the vehicle for that, I think was really critical. And then the very last thing, which is part of what MTO does as well, is finding a community of men that are on the same path, in the form of a men's group. So having other guys that I could talk to really openly about my wins, but also my insecurities, right? And also things that I'm going through, and also kind of like the rawness of being a man, because sometimes we do want to kill people, right? Sometimes our sexuality is really intense. Sometimes our feelings are really extreme, and having other guys specifically, I do great with women in my life too, but other guys specifically that can hold that, validate that, and help me work through kind of that messy rawness so I can show up better in my life has been absolutely critical. It makes me feel a lot less alone.
Yeah, I would say that is very valuable in that space, knowing that we all have those same emotions, right? I don't know that. I mean, I've known some mean men before, and had some mean men in my family, but I can honestly say, like, I never knew anybody that just woke up every day just on purpose was going to be mean today. You know what I mean? I've never known anybody that's just like, oh, I just love being mean. I'm never going to be anything but mean, right? I think it's usually caused by so many other things that you're describing here, and a group like yours can really help. Hopefully help people to break that down and recognize themselves and other men.
And I want to come back just one moment and acknowledge the psychedelics. Okay. So, Michael and I have watched several documentaries on mushrooms, on Netflix and so forth. And it's like, that is so fascinating, because I do believe there's a place for it. And I believe that it does open the mind to get you to see other parts of yourself that you probably didn't even know existed. And no, I'm not advocating for it. And no, I don't sell it. So don't contact me about it. Okay. But I think to each his own, and for medicinal purposes, and getting past some of these issues, I've seen where it helps people with depression, with anger issues, with many other facets of life, and it's fascinating to me. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and come back to it, because I know you mentioned it, and I want to talk a moment about that. There's also been a resurgence of microdosing when it comes to psychedelic mushrooms. Talk a little bit about that role of psychedelics in mental wellness.
Yeah, so I'll talk about both, because you mentioned kind of the medicinal clinical application and the microdosing. So I'll talk about both. So I'm in Colorado. We are on the verge of legalizing psilocybin, which is mushrooms. We are the first state to do it. And a lot of therapists are getting credentialed and trained and all of that. I'm personally not going through credentialing, but I will hire people to run my retreats that are credentialed. But it's becoming something that is in the psychotherapy world is huge. And for me personally, it's been very huge. The value of it is a couple things. One, it's kind of like, when your Wi-Fi breaks, you got to turn it on, turn it back off. It's that, right? It kind of deconstructs your brain in a way where it kind of short circuits it, and you get a chance to see your brain fall apart and come back together, which sounds intense. But what it does is exactly what we're talking about, Tanya, is it shows different parts of ourselves that we often keep very defended. For me, especially initial on, it was grief. So I had what was a bad trip, but a bad trip is only if you judge it, So what I was aware of when I was on mushrooms was a sadness that I carried around all the time, but I kept really hidden. And it gave me both the ability and the safety to really tap into that and be like, well, what's going on there? How can I be with this part that I often really push away? How can I, then take it to therapy and men's group and all that stuff, but really just be with it and sit with it can be really helpful. Another one that a lot of people express that I've also had is just body pain. A lot of people sit with a lot of body pain and a lot of tension and a lot of tightness that a psychedelic can help really understand and be like, well, I'm carrying that around all the time. Or something that I noticed on psychedelics was my anxiety, this idea of running out of time, always feeling like I'm in a rush, always feeling like I'm moving too fast. Things like, they talk about, it's like the fish doesn't know the water that it's in. Right. And psychedelics can let you see the water. It lets you kind of pull back and be like, man, I always feel like I'm rushing. I always feel like I'm talking really fast. I always feel like I'm afraid of I don't know, hitting a deadline or something, right? Like these things that are so deeply buried, it can show us that from a place of non-judgment. And then, those experiences are really helpful, but I do really believe in integration work, which often is psychotherapy, right? It's like, okay, now that you have this flash of insight, then you got to do something about it, right? You gotta talk to someone, you got to work on it. You got to really practice, because it's not going to go away. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic pill. It's not going to like cure you, but it will, like I say, open the door, and then it's on you to walk through it. So that's kind of the clinical one. There's a lot of retreats that do that. Many of them, I mean, some of them are underground in America, and then some of them are in other countries where it is more legal. Mexico and Costa Rica being two big ones that have those types of experiences. And the microdosing, it's especially with psilocybin, which again is mushrooms, seems to be a really good alternative for people for antidepressants. I mean, so many people in America, I think it's like 1 in 3 are on some kind of psychoactive medication, which is wild. And a lot of them have significant side effects. I mean, there are some that are not as bad, like Wellbutrin being one that comes to mind, which doesn't have many, and a lot of people are on that. But once you go above that, there's often things like people often feel very flat. There's sexual dysfunction. There's sleep interruptions. There's all kinds of these side effects. And microdosing doesn't seem to have any of those. It seems to be a more natural solution for some people. And it seems to work with, about, I want to say 40 to 45% of people that try it. I mean, again, nothing's a magic bullet. I will always say that, but it seems to be very effective. And I do hope that there's a lot more clinical research that goes into that, of finding another type of antidepressant that could really help people and minimize side effects, and just kind of open people up to a more bright experience,
Yeah. There's several things you said there, I think, that are really good takeaways. You mentioned stress and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, I'm a type of a person, I believe in the power of the mind. Always have. I believe we're not even tapped into it as humans, obviously. And there's so much more potential of what we can do. But, I found myself, stressed, shoulders, pain, I mean, to the point of this agony all the time. I'm a big believer in chiropractic. I get a massage every other week. Like and I could not even mentally get rid of this pain, of this stress. And even though I knew nobody was putting this stress on me but me. Like I own my own company. I can go into work if I want to go into work or not. We're fiscally sound. There was literally no outside pressure putting this pressure on me. And I just wonder about things like that. If that would be something that would have, got rid of that pain faster. What ended up happening was just really intense. I found a super good chiropractor, and they really helped me with this. What bothered me though, and maybe you have an answer, is like psychologically, even though I knew the power of the mind to tell my body to relax, I couldn't get it to work. Like my mind could not control those muscles enough, no matter what I did, to get them to relax. It was interesting.
Yeah. So I'll put on my therapy hat for a minute. So what you talk about, a lot of guys have, a lot of men struggle with that, is like physical pain and stress without any kind of physical external. In fact, many guys like you, where they're fit, they're running, they're lifting, they're doing the massages, like everything, they're doing way more than the average person physically to deal with something, but there still is like this sense of tightness. So something like psychedelics could be helpful, because often underneath that is an emotional core. For me, it was grief. For some people, it's trauma, right? It's fear, it's anger, it's sadness, right? It's something that isn't physical, right? And when I've been in, retreat experiences or in psychotherapy experiences, if you can really tune into that under a psychedelic or something, right? And you can really focus on it, breathe into it. Some people have this experience in the gym or at yoga, really like honing in mindfulness practice, meditation practice, other ways to get into it if you're not into psychedelics, right? But feeling into it, breathing into it, at some point it will crack. And you might have a real feeling, like a real intense feeling. And what I would say to you and other guys in the same situations, do not be afraid of that, because that is your North Star. That's your compass. That's something to really listen to and try to understand. And it is really scary for a lot of guys. An experience that I've had, maybe you've had, a lot of men have had, is, if you're at the gym, right, and you're lifting and you really get into a really embodied physical state, a lot of guys report feeling really sad all of a sudden, or crying even a little bit, or tearing up, or feeling really like sensitive. Or if you're doing yoga or stretching and you get into it, the edge of a range of emotion, some guys report, and I've had this experience, of feeling fear. All of a sudden terror comes up, and it's like, why am I so afraid? I'm just stretching my hamstring, And it's because we're carrying that with us. and it's not about the hamstring. It's about something in our past that is unprocessed. And I'm not going to go, I don't know your pastor. I've only met you for 25 minutes.
Right.
But I would encourage you to really look into that, because it's not just about stress. And the answer is not just relaxing and not just chiropractic. Those are great things to manage it and to still be able to function, but there is likely something deeper
to that.
Some healing. Yeah.
And would you say, I know we're running out of time here, but would you say also that, this is a blanket statement, like we're all humans, right? So, we all have the potential we're all dealing with something, right? Everybody's fighting a hard battle in some way. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's absolutely no shame in having deeper stuff. Everybody has it.
Yeah.
And when you think of like a little kid, something that they go through, right? It's like a little body with a big emotion. You can see, when a kid has a temper tantrum or is freaking out, like that stuff it's so embodied. It's like everything in them. And that gets stuck in us. And as we grow up, we have to suppress that more and more in order to be an adult, right? But those feelings are in there. So finding outlets to be able to have those experiences, therapy being, I think, the primary one, right? But having outlets to be able to release that and really feel, to be alive. Being human doesn't mean being happy all the time. It means having the full spectrum of emotions. And I think the masculine edge to that is being confident and courageous in all those emotions, right? You don't have to be scared of being sad. You don't have to be scared of being angry. You don't have to be scared of being insecure. It's about being able to look that demon in the eye, have a conversation with it, and move forward, right? To me, that's real courage, right? It's not, going to war is obviously courageous, but it's like this inner battle is, I think, the battle that a lot of men are being called to fight right now.
Oh, wow.
Well said. Well said. And hopefully there's a listener out there that's being helped by this. And to carry that further, Marc, tell everybody how they can connect with you and learn more about the great work that you're doing.
For sure. So the best place is our website, which is menstherapy.online. So one word, menstherapy.online. That has everything on there. We are a psychotherapy practice. We work with people all over the country, doing both individual counseling. We do men's groups. We do 3 retreats a year. 2 of them are wilderness retreats in Colorado, where we go hiking, backpacking, things like that. And one is something called psychodrama, which is similar to what we're talking about in this, where you really act out your issues. So we have guys screaming, crying, breaking shit, holding each other, like really embodying it. So it's way more than just talk therapy. We also offer a men's community of guys that get it. So we have a Slack channel that comes with the practice, where you can talk to other guys 24/7, talk to your therapist all the time, get that support no matter where you are, no matter what's going on, with people that are on the same level. Because it's often difficult to find men that have or are even interested in emotional development. A lot of the male experiences I've had, stereotypically, sports, drinking, very surface level. And I found myself in my own recovery process really wanting that extra step, going a little bit deeper. So menstherapy.online, that's our services. And we've got a podcast, Men's Therapy Podcast. We got online videos. We have a ton of free content as well that you can check out, tons of blogs, tons of articles. So all that stuff is available if you just want to learn asynchronously and try to get a sense of what it means to be a better man.
Very good.
Wow. Thank you so much, Marc, for taking this time with us. I knew the moment that I met you, I had the privilege of meeting you first, that you were going to be a guest on our podcast if you would accept. And thank you for sharing not only a lot of things today that I think will help a lot of men, but sharing your own unique story and how you got to where you are right now. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the time as well.
Ready to change how you're seen and charge what you're worth? If you're not getting enough opportunities to meet with ideal customers, or the prospects you're meeting with just aren't ideal, it's most likely your brand that's holding you back. So if you're a coach, consultant, or expert who is on the rise, you need our ultimate guide to a freedom-based brand. Download it free now at BrandFaceGuide.com.